Hello, everyone. Welcome to Optimize for Humans, your favorite podcast, I'm sure, exploring how we strategically bring AI into the workplace and also make the most of our human capital within organizations. Today, I have joining me Julie Spurlin. Julie is a transformational HR executive with over 20 years of experience scaling global, high growth, and private equity backed companies. Julie has proven success aligning people's strategy with business outcomes, driving growth, and leading cultural transformations. She's a trusted advisor to executives and board teams. She's got deep expertise in org design, talent, performance, mergers and acquisitions. Julie has served in people and talent leadership positions across private equity portfolio companies, as well as large multinational organizations, including RSA, Sun, Software AG, to name just a few. She's passionate about challenging traditional HR thinking and building purpose-driven, high-performing organizations. And my favorite, she's passionate about putting the human back in human resources. Julie, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
It is absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to start with this term human resources. I know we had a little rant about it when we first spoke, and I thought we should bring others into this conversation. What do we love about this term? What do we hate about this term? I'll let you start, and then I'll come in with my rant.
Sure, absolutely. I love the human part. I don't love the resources part. Um, I think it stems from the heritage of our function, way back in the dusty, musty days of personnel. Um, and I think it's an indicator, a little bit of a holdover of the very operational aspects. And what I think it doesn't embrace as a term is all of the work around talent and culture and belonging and, really cultivating the culture around performance and all of those other aspects. I think when you just say people, that sounds a little fluffy and ignores the operation side. So I'm not sure there is a perfect term. I think talent and some facet probably speaks to it, but yeah, the human part I'm all here for. The resources part's a little, um, you know, widget kind of oriented, if you ask me.
Yeah, totally. The thing that I actually do love about the term is that it is a reminder that we do have this industrial era kind of history where I think originally when the function first came alive, people were robots just coming in as a cog in the wheel. You're putting the
Hmm.
widget, I'm putting in a widget, and our outcomes or our outcomes were directly correlated with the time we've come in and the number of widgets we've put in, etc.
Right.
And I think we were resources at that time. And I imagine HR was more just like approving leave and managing compensation and kind of these more
Time cards.
time cards, these like transactional elements of the workplace, which are still alive and which should be still alive. Um, but we've changed, the nature of work has changed so drastically. And I remember a long time ago, and I won't name the company, but working with a client and running a leadership training, and a leader was like, well, I mean, is it that hard for you to have like 10 more direct reports? All you're doing is approving their leave. Like, I don't understand why this is an issue for you. Like, give me 50, I've got this.
Right.
And again, just missing, in that context, missing a little bit of actually there's the management side of things, there's the leadership
Hmm.
side of things. And in the same way, I think this whole term of like human resources is in some way objectifying us to the cogs in
Hmm.
the wheel that we were, but we are no longer.
Yes, I would love to believe that our function has evolved and is continuing to evolve. Um,
Yeah,
and we have adapted to the new ways of working, some naturally, some by happenstance and force, a la COVID. We had to do a lot of adjusting
absolutely.
to how we approached our practice, when that occurred. So yeah, I mean, it's what everybody knows. I think, and you walk in a room, it's like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I do HR, and then you immediately wait for the like, and and no, not that kind of HR. But I think that's it. We need
Yeah.
we need a rebrand. We need some good PR or something, I think, out there for the function.
Totally. If anyone listening has some good ideas, please let us know. We'll start the rebranding movement from here. Um, well, like the other thing I wanted to say is I think HR is really well positioned to lead AI adoption because I don't think it's just a technological adoption or technological implementation. I think there's so much more that is happening, and we probably need to start thinking about AI as being a part of our team. And what does that mean? What does that look like? And how can an HR team support that kind of AI integrating into teams
Right.
and having this kind of human AI partnership in a really meaningful way? And I'd love to start by exploring with you, how do you think AI can best be leveraged within the HR function? What are some things that it can help us do better?
Gosh, I have to tell you, I think there's infinite ways, and we've only just really seen the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more below the surface. But one of the key areas that I think that it is unlocking so much potential and time, and goodness in general is in the recruiting function. Um, there's so much that is embedded in the applicant tracking systems today, the ATSs, whether it's AI sourcing capabilities, screening, all of those kinds of things. And what often can take a human a long time to kind of cull through, some resumes are very, very long out there. Hint, you should make them a little shorter. There's a human looking at it, and sometimes, but in ingesting all of that information is really time consuming, but so critical, because like we can't move people further along in the pipeline without that proper review. But by taking some of that assistance that comes in the tools that are now available, I think that's a great way. Another place that I see it is in communications. So, when you're looking at internal comms as being such an important part of the HR function as well, um, one of the things that I think it can help do, particularly for global companies, is to run it through some of the different tools that are out there and ensure that it is culturally applicable, that it is vernacularly right. I think that's a word it is now. Um, and that it's kind of fitting to the audience that you're sending it to. It's really easy sometimes as like an American, if I was trying to craft something for India or Singapore or even, Germany, there's nuances. And I think utilizing the tools and resources for the review and recommendations on how to do the messaging is a great asset that we have at our disposal now.
Yeah, and I think more and more we'll see this across the board, but this like customization element as well. I know some of the HR systems that I've interacted with that I've like felt the most joy from were ones where it felt like a custom experience. Like there's a
Hmm.
place where I could go where I'm like, all right, here's my benefits, here's my leave, like here's all the information that I need that's relevant to me, and the system is sort of interacting with me to make sure I'm like complying as a good kind of corporate
Oh, for sure.
citizen. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a great experience with a tool recently that we adopted for compliance purposes. So it was a legal repository. We could subscribe for the whole nation. They had different pieces of it, but literally I could go in and like type my question, even without having to know the ins and
Yeah.
outs of what exactly I was looking for. And it would bring up, and it continued to cull down until it got directly to what I was looking for, chapter and verse. And it was amazing, instead of, yes, I likewise could have spent time Googling, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great tool in HR. But this was really targeted, and helped me ensure that what I was proposing was actually going to work in the multitude of states that I was operating in. And I mean, just what a time saver that was from a
Yeah,
researching standpoint.
absolutely. What are your thoughts on performance systems and how we might be able to leverage AI on that front?
So I've had an interesting experience with this, and I can't. really talk about AI without also mentioning the ML component of it, because I think they're so critical. And one of
Sorry,
the
just so our listeners know, when you say ML, you're talking about machine learning.
machine learning,
Yeah.
yes, for sure. So the importance of the machine learning, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But um, in a performance platform that I was recently using, one of the things that they had introduced as an enhancement was like an AI assessment of the narrative that the manager put in. So, we set up our performance assessment to, have some clickable things, rating wise, but then also you're really driving the conversation, more importantly. And at the end of it, it would do a little AI assessment of like, okay, what you wrote was 76% positive. Is that what you intended?
Nice.
The machine learning component was you had to give it some feedback, because, like, let's say I used some very specific words and terms, and I felt like, well, no, this was like 98%
Mm.
positive. I needed to give the feedback to the system so it would continue to learn, since it was a new function for that software platform. I think that was really helpful. It's a good gut check for managers, and like, hey, do my words match my intention? If somebody, the employee or otherwise, is reading this, and I say this person is performing at a high level, does my commentary flow with that, or is anything at odds, and can I tweak that and make it a little bit more clear in either event? Right, sometimes you're trying to say it constructively, but you're being too nice, and the point may not be coming across. So having those kinds of pieces built into the platforms, I think, is really useful as those like gate checks for especially managers who may not be really fluent at doing performance evaluations or assessments.
Yeah, I think those checks and balances, there's a lot of opportunity in that. Like one of the pitfalls that I often find is positive feedback is often non-specific. So, people can be quite specific and clear in their critical feedback of like, what do I want you to do differently? And the positive feedback is like, that was great.
Yeah.
You led that
Usha did a
meeting in
great
a
job.
fantastic way.
Yeah.
Right. What did I do that was great?
Yeah.
What worked well? How does that match up to the expectations of my job? And I
Yes.
think there's a lot of possibility and opportunity to actually have these systems like bring all of those together of like, hey, remember, like, this is where the bar is at. Like, this is what we're trying to measure them up against. Based on that, can you be specific about how they're meeting that bar or not? I don't even like to use that
Exactly.
as a bar, but it's like if these are the qualities we're looking for and capabilities
Hmm.
that we're looking for, let's get specific on that feedback. And if we're giving constructive feedback, how is that helping them and how is it ensuring that we're actually telling people what we want to see more of, and not
Correct.
just going down this road of like, I didn't like that, I didn't like this, etc. So these like seemingly basic things, I know, are still really difficult when you're like in that
Hmm.
moment trying to figure out how to share feedback. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for the machine to coach the leaders
Yes,
through sharing more thoughtful feedback. But of
absolutely.
course, this brings us to another piece and question of, what about bias? What do we need to teach the AI to avoid risks like bias? And that's really just one risk.
So, where I think the example that comes to mind, I think very easily, is in the recruiting, in AI sourcing, screening, et cetera. We teach it what we're looking for with the keywords, and, kind of how going back, our Boolean searches, right? Like you would put in all the keywords that you wanted. Now we're having the system do that for us. So I think those words are what's really critical. And, it's the same kind of concept. I know there's some tools out there that you can put your job requisition into and have it scan for bias. Um, and it will highlight words. And I mean, it's something as simple as the use of the word rock star has really fallen out of favor, for example. It has like a connotation, it has sort of a male orientation, arguably or not, but it does. And so even just something as simple as that the system learns those things. Again, there's some great tools out there that are already very smart. But if you are just starting out on it, you want to ensure that it is very objective, not subjective, that the terms are really key and critical, and that you're not inadvertently, alienating out potential pockets of the organization. Um, and this could be anything from like overuse of the word senior, for example. It may take out somebody who has absolutely top-notch skills, but maybe doesn't qualify senior by years of experience or something like that. So it's it's really important to use these tools, but if I'm going back to like the construction term of measure twice, cut once.
Mm.
It's a little bit like that of, we're still teaching these tools and systems. Again, some are much more refined by now than others, but as we do, it's still important to check and ensure that you don't over rotate in one way or another that would alienate or isolate out, potential populations of people.
Yeah, and I think on the screening from like a hiring screen
Hmm.
perspective, that's I think there's like tremendous opportunity there. And also, I don't know yet what all the risks are, but I think that's something to really look for. And we know this of just things like, sort of anglicized names, I guess if I can
Yes.
call it that,
Yeah.
tend to be put forward. This is some of the unconscious bias that's baked
Right.
into us as humans, right? I think male applicants tend to have a bit of a leg up, etc.
Hmm.
And again, this isn't actual humans making those calls deliberately of like, I think a man would do this better. It's completely unconscious. And there's a way in which I think with the screening process, you can actually, the AI, you can code it in such a way
Yes.
that the name isn't even taken into
Yeah,
account.
the masking capabilities are tremendous these days. You can take off a lot of the identifying information, even,
Yeah,
the year you graduated from university. You can take off the name, you can take off an address, right? If we are going on in a hybrid first or remote first type of thing, then maybe location, don't let that factor in, right? If it's truly not important, either that or it's important, right? Like you either do or
right.
you don't. But you can take all of these things and it presents a profile, again, the way, if I think about like the headhunters, executive recruiters, they usually put forward like a bio. These tools today that are available to practitioners can also do that on a much, smaller scale for, even a software developer one. It can do the same kind of like, let me call down, here's this person's profile, whoever this person may be, wherever they are.
Yeah, I think the masking capabilities is a tremendous one. And to that point of measure twice, cut once, I wonder if, like, one thing that HR teams can do as they're testing these systems is run it through that screen, but have a human go through all of the discarded
Yes.
resumes to make sure just make sure the system is getting really good first
Hmm.
and that you can really trust it in a meaningful way. Switching gears a little bit, I'd love to talk to you around how, like, let's talk hiring a little bit more. As AI comes into the workplace more and more, what capabilities in the humans should we be looking for and optimizing for?
So, I thought about this question a lot, and my brain went in a couple different directions. So, on one, I would say for, kind of the existing workforce today, I think that we need to hire people that have a learning agility. I mean, and again, okay, while you always want to have that, I think it's important because technology is changing at such a rapid, rapid pace. I feel like the older I get, the faster it goes. Um, and
Absolutely.
so these nuances, it's not the same. Like I used to be able to look at a piece of paper and say like yes or no to a candidate, right? Like that's one, discernment. But now to be able to use the tools and fully utilize the functionality they're in them, I have to be willing to learn. I have to be willing to learn more than just my craft of how to look at a resume. I need to learn how to use the tools to my advantage as well. So that learning agility, that curiosity, and a drive to how do I optimize for impact? That is what, like, that potential is what we want to be looking for in HR. So where you can utilize the tools and resources to take care of so much of like the table stakes, the meat and potatoes, whatever you want to call it, of the day, so that you are freed up to do the more consultative work. I mean, this is really what HR has been striving for, right? To be more consultative, to be more strategic, to be have that seat at the table. So you have to have the mindset of not being afraid of embracing the technology. It is not going to replace us. um you can't
Hopefully.
replace people, hopefully. It shouldn't. I will be so bold as to say that when it comes to a function like human resources, it should
Yeah,
not. It should be an enablement, it should not be a replacement. There are certainly things there. I think the other track I mentioned that my brain went to is when I look at, I have two college age kids, and when I look at how universities, yes, they have advanced screening to ensure that you did not write your entire paper using AI, but they are embracing it more and more as a leverage point for folks as they go into their career. So, how do you run your thesis through for I mean, something as simple as Grammarly, right? If Grammarly had been around, I probably could have, there would have been many executives I worked with who probably would have taken advantage of that and improved their communications at the same time. But as we have this new generation coming into the workforce, I think they're coming with more and more of that in inherent in what they're learning and what they're doing for their craft. So I think, for the existing workforce, we need to have that learning agility and the ability to embrace like the future and the technology, and how to make it work for us. And then also look to the generation that's coming up to push us and to encourage us to utilize these new and advancing tools.
yeah, absolutely. I think, that learning agility, that growth mindset, I think those components will always be really, really meaningful and just increasingly more so. We used to live in a world where you wrote a job description once and somebody could kind of hold their hat to that, as they say, for 5 years and say, well, this is my
Yep.
job description, this is what I've been doing. I don't know the last time I had a job description that I was actually really like living into in my work, because
Well, that
my
was the
work,
and other duties assigned. No, I'm just kidding.
exactly. Well, I had a lot of other duties
Yes.
in most of my work, and there's something there to be said about, like selecting for that and like
Hmm.
enabling people to solve the problems in front of them
Yes.
continually, um, and
In a
empowering them.
new and creative way too,
Yeah,
right now. So the going back and relying on some of the same tools, resources, pillars, et cetera, that we've used forever is not going to, speaking for the HR function, it's not going to keep us credible to the business, particularly those of us that operate in technology businesses, which I've spent a large part of my career in doing so. To be taken seriously, particularly in a software organization, for example, I need to be software forward. I need to be thinking about the tools and resources in the same way that my company's customers, should be looking at, it's hard when HR gets stuck in paper, um, and we don't carry the same gravitas that we can as if we were talking as like technological equals to some of our counterparts around the executive table.
yeah, and I think this is probably true beyond the HR function to like all kind of internal functions like legal, finance, etc. I think we can leverage the technology to do more of that compliance activity and the
Hmm.
transactional activities. And
Yes.
I think the internal functions can and should be freed up to do the business partnership, to actually proactively get that seat at the table and solve the problems as a partner. Because
Yes.
oftentimes where I find the business functions go a little bit rogue or where they fall into traps is when they're not even thinking about some of these lenses, because they don't have to, whether it's legal or the people lens, or what have you. But it's often quite a critical lens to have at the table. And the teams I've seen that have been most successful are the ones who engage those functions as partners along the journey, and it's not a tick the box exercise at the very end of, hey, we've done all of this work, can you just sign off on this so we can like hire that person? or can you just sign off on this so I can just like get this contract over to the client?
Yes.
And then you're downstream having to figure out a whole lot of things and like doing ninja moves to get the client, your client who's the internal
Yes.
business, what they want while also still keeping things compliant, etc. So I just think there's lots of real opportunity there, um, and I think there is something to be said about what do we want to use the humans for, and I hope HR teams are really advocating for that.
Well, and I think kind of going on that, pulling that thread, I think, as I mentioned, like I hope that we're never replaced. I think over my career and regardless of the technological capabilities, tooling, and resources, some of the most critical and impacting conversations that I have had in my career have been the most human. It is helping someone through the loss of a significant other. It is working with someone as they are undergoing a medical crisis and don't have an understanding, or the benefits, didn't kick in the way they were wanting to, or whatever. Those conversations, I feel so strongly that you cannot be human enough in those. You have to be able to sit down, and there's the question they're asking, and there's the millions of questions underneath of that question, and that is incumbent upon the human aspect of what we do, to pull that out and really get it. How do we meet their needs, right? Is it a safety issue? Is it like, etc. How do we get at the core of what they really need so that we can get them back to either, you know, being fully functioned and not distracted by whatever problem has arisen, or that, they get granted leave or whatever the situation may need. But I think that piece, you can't put that into a system and have an answer spit out, not with the complexities of the humans.
Yeah, and even if the AI is incredibly empathetic in its response, it's not the same as having an actual human in front of you who's
Right.
actually feeling that empathy and connecting with you, and just being there with you. So you feel a little
Hmm.
bit less alone in those big moments.
Absolutely.
My last question for you, Julie, is for the executives out there. So the executive rooms, the board rooms who are thinking about AI and what it means in the workplace and how to be strategic about it. What is one piece of advice you would share? One like practical piece of advice you would share as an HR expert?
So this is maybe going to sound a little glib, but I would say you got to embrace it. I think that, I've worked for a myriad of organizations, and risk tolerance is always one of those things that comes up. And I think there's a lot of organizations out there that are still leery of it. I have been through my fair share of, more than my fair share, I would say, of breaches and things like that that have happened. So I know that there are vulnerabilities that come in any of the technologies that we're talking about. However, with good safety protocols, security screens, all of those kinds of things, trust your IT backbone, get that really solid, but embrace this, because the optimization that comes when you are freeing people up to do the thinking and not just the doing, that's where the innovation happens. That's where the great ideas come to life, and your folks are not so exhausted by the mill every day that they are not able to look to the horizon of like where you want to go as a business. So I think understanding some of the hesitancy, but embrace it. Be uncomfortable if you need to. Maybe dip a toe in the pool if you're not ready for, a full AI functionality, whole co-pilot type of scenario. But, something as simple as Grammarly, allowing that as a plug-in into your systems, or, the quality improvement that you'll see and the ease with which, it is an equalizer, especially for folks that maybe don't come from native English speaking. I think there's simple ways to do it, to try, and to get your workforce used to it in a way before you do any great moves. In fact, I would almost like, if you are somewhat hesitant or a little leery of the risks that may be involved, I would say take those tiny steps towards it, because this is ultimately, you see more and more, this is ultimately where we're going. Um, so it's better to embrace it on the early side, make it a part of your technology stack and your security posture. So you're kind of getting ahead of that, not in like a catch up or responsive type of way.
I love that. I think I've been maybe making an assumption that a lot of people listening are already embracing it, but I think actually you're reminding me that there's probably a lot of people who are almost like a little bit frozen out of fear
Hmm.
and have this sense of like, we need to do this, but not quite sure where to start, and more risk averse as a starting point.
Right.
And I love that idea of like, just start small, dip your toe, test and learn, and see what works, see what doesn't, and kind of evolve bit by bit in an iterative fashion.
Well, I think too, the last thing I'll say is, I think depending on the industry that your organization is serving, there may be some ideas that maybe they're not ready for it either. But sometimes, sneakily enough, it's happening in their lives anyway. And as we talk about that next generation coming into the workforce, where they are far more tech savvy than I'm a Gen Xer, so far more tech savvy. My kids probably could have gotten my headphones working. Um, the regardless of industry, you're going to have those folks there, and the more forward thinking you can be. And even if you offer it in parallel with one of more traditional offerings or things like that, have it out there. People can try, they can test it, and even to their customer base, let alone what we do internally to our internal customers as a function of HR.
I love that. Julie, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I hope leaders out there really think about how the HR function can be a real enabler, and especially as it comes to AI adoption. And I appreciate all of your insights in this space.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time.